Hail to thee, great finisher of law school.
And there was much rejoicing.
Hello and welcome to Lexitecture, a podcast about word origins and histories. My name is Ryan, and in each episode my friend Amy and I bring a new pair of words to share their stories with each other and you. You can find our past episodes and the occasional blog post on our website at lexitecture.com. Follow along with us on Twitter and Facebook at Lexitecture, and if you really like what we do, you can support the show at patreon.com/lexitecture.
Today's episode, quiz volume. I suppose we'd better talk about some words, eh?
Yeah, we should talk about some words. We've long since stopped taking turns, but I don't remember what we did last time. Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first, or how do we?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first.
All right.
I do not know. Oh, I think I did go first last time because I had a ridiculously long entry last time. But I'm happy to go first.
Sure, go ahead. We'd also before you jump in, we wanted to give a shout out to listener Loretta, who recognized you as the feminist icon that you are in an email that we got.
We did indeed have to give a massive shout out to Loretta. Such a great email. So, Ryan, proceed. Tell our dear listeners what this is all about. Loretta, you rock.
So Loretta sent us an email basically just to... she said that the conversations were nice and she liked the show and stuff, but primarily what she wanted to say is she really enjoyed Amy's...
When I interrupt Ryan.
There it is. So we just made Loretta happy, and I'm happy to have done that. Saying basically, not only does she always have something good to say, which is true, but that it's generally the other way around, and generally the long-standing tradition of society, our broken and miserable society, is that if there's a woman and a man in a conversation, the man is doing most of the interrupting and talking over. And so it's just refreshing.
Not here.
Not here. In your face, patriarchy.
You know, it's hilarious because I was consciously trying hard to interrupt you all the way through what you were saying because I thought it would be funny to do that. And when I'm trying, it's actually quite hard.
It doesn't come as
naturally. I think
naturally.
because I'm automatically like, oh, interrupting is a little bit rude. So now that I'm going to interrupt, oh, but should I interrupt? What should I say? Oh, once I engage my brain, my interrupting spidey skills are somewhat impaired. Yeah. So I think I'll just have to carry on getting excited and going, oh, things to say.
Yeah. Just let muscle memory take over.
I was most delighted to hear that because, you know, I do sometimes feel a bit like I'm being a bit rude. But yeah, Loretta's right. Women should interrupt men far more often.
Way more often.
Really.
All over the place.
Yeah, cool. Okay, words.
Words.
So last time I very much had a quarantine word, to, you know, a word of the times to talk about.
Yes.
And my word today is also a bit of a word of the times because like everybody else, I'm in the house. And like everybody else, you know, I miss human contact. And like everybody else, suddenly Zoom has become an ordinary, everyday part of my existence.
Yeah, that's so weird.
I had heard of Zoom. I had used Zoom a few times as a meeting participant prior to the apocalypse. But these days, I am a user of Zoom and a subscriber of Zoom because it's how I teach my classes online. So I've had a big old learning curve with Zoom. But the good thing about having a subscription is it means I can have as many group meetings as I like with friends, with family, with folk that otherwise I wouldn't be able to see. So, you know, it's nice. It's not as good as seeing people in real life, but it's a pretty good substitute, considering that seeing people in real life is kind of dangerous. Yeah. So Zoom has become a thing. And that's great. And I'm really enjoying that. And another thing that has become a thing is that over the past week, I'd say, I've been invited to take part in, or I have taken part in, at least 4 pub quizzes. Now, wow. I don't know how popular that is in Canada. Like, we used to run a quiz in Chongju. Aaron Dugan was like Mr. Trivia. And we would take turns to kind of make up the questions, and that was a thing that went on. But, you know, I enjoy a pub quiz.
Yeah.
I like useless trivia. I enjoy chatting and learning about stuff. And My mum is an absolute fiend for pub quizzes, despite being someone who doesn't like pubs.
Wow, that's
So,
a talent.
You know, I come from a pub quizzing stock, I suppose.
Right.
And this is fine. Like I say, I enjoy quizzes. However, it seemed to be the case that quite quickly, every single Zoom chat had to have a quiz in there somewhere. And I was a bit like, dude, I have faith in my ability to have a conversation without having to answer a trivia question. Like, can't we just hang out?
Right,
Can't
yeah.
we just do stuff? But no, it would seem we can't. There has to. No, I'm totally joking. Like last week, one of my friends said, "Hey, I was going to do we have this weekly chat where we have a catch up," and one of my friends said, "Why don't I do a quiz?" And I was like, "Could we not do a quiz? Maybe." Like, I am a bit quizzed out. If you want to do a quiz, that's totally fine. But maybe I won't join you because there's been loads. But yeah, it's sort of like that whole thing about I love doing nothing, but now that I have to do nothing,
Yes.
I don't like it. Like, I love doing quizzes, but now that they're all quizzes, I'm a bit like, meh.
Yeah.
But the long and the short of it is, mainly the long, is that I started to wonder about the etymology of the word quiz.
Nice.
And I found that it is an interesting one.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Oh, interesting indeed. Because when you go to the OED and you look in the entry for the etymology of the word quiz, it has those two most magical words, origin unknown.
Awesome. I love those.
And we love origin unknown. So get on your folk etymology pants and prepare for a ride. So the OED says this. The source of quotation from 1793 at Sense 1b suggests that the word was regarded as unusual at an early date. Quotations from 1782 and 1793 at Sense 1a both associate the word with a university setting, and quotation 1780, which is the earliest written citation of the word, at Sense 1a purports to be written from Oxford, while the following identifies Sense 1b as public school slang. This quotation comes from 1798 from G. Coleman's Heir at Law. A jig, that's an Eton phrase. The Westminster call it quiz. And then there's a rather lovely story. So again, starting with the OED here, the following anecdote is widely repeated but cannot be confirmed. It appears earliest in the Manchester Times, 24th January 1835, and the man in question is probably Richard Daly, whose dates are 1758 to 1813. He was an Irish actor and he was a theatre manager from 1780. So we have here this citation from 1836 from a book called Walker Remodelled. Walker Remodelled, which I looked up and was able to access a little bit of, it is a dictionary, basically. A dictionary from 1836, which is always good fun because old dictionaries are awesome. So it says in Walker Remodelled, Daly, the manager of a Dublin playhouse, wagered that a word of no meaning should be the common talk and puzzle of the city in 24 hours. In the course of this time, the letters Q-U-I-Z were chalked or pasted on all the walls of Dublin with an effect that won the wager.
Man.
This rather brilliant anecdote suggests that this guy, Richard Daly, said, I'm going to make up a word. Not only am I going to make up a word, I'm going to make up a word and I'm going to make it so popular that people are using it within a single day. Now, that's not just folk etymology. That's like the sort of folk etymology that gets you a ballad written.
Yeah.
And it would seem in a sense that it worked. But, you know, it's very, very difficult to kind of take that on, particularly considering that the word dates from the 1780s. However, it's a cool story. And, you know, we like a cool story around these parts.
I cannot even describe how desperately I want that story to be true.
Absolutely.
I cannot quantify how badly I want that to be why we have the word quiz now. Like, I don't care if it was like technically a word that existed before, blah, blah, blah. I badly want that to be why we know the word quiz now.
Yeah, it's like kind of guerrilla etymology, isn't it?
It is. It's like, just, I'm just going to drop this
I'm
word
just
bomb.
making a word.
Go.
And you are all going to use it.
Oh, I want that so bad.
So we come through a few different senses of the word, as we heard earlier in the OED, some of which come seem to come from public schools, and some of which seem to come from, well, who knows where. So the first sense, given from 1780, is a rare and archaic sense, meaning an odd or an eccentric person, particularly a person whose appearance is peculiar or ridiculous. There are a few different senses relating to oddity or eccentricity. Now, I am all about that at the moment because, quarantine days are eccentric times.
They are.
And someone sent me a meme quite early into this whole we might have to stay at home business, saying, it's recommended that when you're working from home, you get up and you put on clothes and you have a routine and you make sure that your life kind of keeps ticking over in some form. And the meme was like, screw that shit. I want people wearing ball gowns, going full on Miss Havisham, standing at their windows, glowering at strangers walking past. and I sent this to a couple of friends and they were like, let's get on it. Yeah. At which point I remembered that my wedding dress is in the wardrobe and really I could rock some Miss Havisham craziness.
Oh man.
However, I haven't quite got into that yet, but I'm a short-haired person who on average gets a haircut every 5 or 6 weeks. So there's some interesting times in my future. I feel like I might at the moment be a bit of a quiz.
I think we all know what you have to do with that dress, by the way.
Sorry?
I think we all know what you have to do with that dress and that front window.
Yeah.
Like you have to be there.
I really do. I have a good front window for it too. It's kind of high up and people walk past. And I could become that crazy lady really quite quickly.
Get your glower on.
So we have we have these sort of 1780, 1781, 1782. He's a droll quiz, and I rather like him. Things like that.
Oh, okay.
There are a few who take a pleasure in conversing on letters, but they are solitary mortals, and themselves are stigmatised in the cant language of the place, meaning Oxford and Cambridge, with the name of quizzes. He's a queer quiz. Things like that. So someone in a university whose behaviour or appearance might be a little bit unusual. And this then became a peculiar or a ridiculous thing. Just,
right.
An object with the same quality. Then we get sense 2, which is, it's led me to another word that I didn't know, and it's really, really pleasing. Sense number 2 states that a quiz is a bandalour. This is another obsolete usage of the word. Do you know what a bandalour is?
I do not.
It's such a brilliant word, and I love the definition so much because they could have made this definition so much faster and so much easier. The OED states that a bandalour is a toy containing a coiled string which caused it, when thrown down, to rise again to the hand by the winding up of the string by which it was held.
A yo-yo?
4 letters. That's all they needed. Like, hey, what's a bandalour? It's a yo-yo.
It's a yo-yo.
Done. Hey, what's a bandalour? It's a toy containing a coiled string which caused it when thrown down to rise again to the hand by the winding up of the string by which it was held. I feel like you might be considered a bit of a quiz if you were to give that particular definition of a bandalour.
That's amazing.
But yeah, so this was, there are a few citations, one from 1792 and the other two from roughly 1833. The Duke was, I recollect, playing with one of those toys called quizzes. So the French called it a bandalour and the English called it a quiz at this point in history, certainly. Then we got on to the kind of general sense of mockery or questioning. So we have the 3A sense: a practical joke, a hoax, a piece of mockery or banter, or a witticism. And no sense yet that this has anything to do with asking questions, which, I find particularly interesting. Yeah. So again, starting in 1795 with this sense, whether it's better in the mind to suffer the laughter and quizzes of the powdered pates, and a variety of different ways talking about this, just like a joke, a bit of a laugh, a bit of banter. This then brings us on to the action of mocking someone or something. And also another rare usage, obsolete usage, saying the action of examining something closely. So you might go to the pigeon fancier and know each breed by quiz of eye. So I think this sense kind of gets us into, for me certainly, it feels a bit more like finding something out.
Yeah.
Examining something closely that perhaps takes us to eventually what we would know by the modern sense of the word quiz. We then get from there a person who ridicules or who engages in banter, a wit or a mocker or a practical joker. And finally, not until we get to sense 5 do we get a set of questions used to test knowledge or to promote learning. And specifically and chiefly originally and chiefly North American, a short oral or written examination given by a teacher.
Right, yeah.
We don't really use that sense of the word in the UK at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you wouldn't say to a class, okay, we're going to have a quiz next week. They would expect, you might have a quiz at the end of term as a bit of fun, but it would take the form of a pub quiz, a TV quiz. We are going to answer questions and compete rather than I am going to test your knowledge. And that gives us sense 5B, a set of questions provided as an entertainment or a series of questions asked of competing individuals or teams and often divided into rounds. And it states here that this is now chiefly British. So interesting to kind of come through those different usages, but also to have that kind of diversion of over this side of the pond we say this and over this side of the pond we say this too, but we mean two completely different things. Lots and lots of compounds going on, quiz show, quiz viewer, quiz party, all that kind of stuff. Oh, I was going to tell you a bit more about Walker Remodeled. I found it on Google Books. I found the page which has the entry for quiz, but it does look otherwise very much like a standard dictionary with the words listed in columns and the definitions given. The thing that I wanted to share, it doesn't relate to the word at all, other than that it appears on the same page of Walker Remodeled, is the word quook. That's Quook.
Ooh.
And the most delightful thing about this word is that its entry says, quook, C to quake. I believe that means that quook, in this book at least, is the past tense of quake. And that is something that I couldn't possibly leave out.
No, of course not.
So, yeah.
Oh, man.
We can then consider, well, what about the actual etymology? Well, we've come through the meanings, and OED says unknown. But of course, there are always ideas, there are always kind of fancies. And one of the ones that I liked best was that it's perhaps come from the middle syllable of inquisitive.
That's what I was wondering.
It feels to me quite folk etymologically kind of dubious, but at the same time it's one of these that I'd kind of like that to be true.
Yeah.
Another suggestion is that it could be from the Latin quies, which means
what is?
Oh, I've totally lost. Yeah, what is totally lost my place. And yeah, so quies as in Quies from quies. Sorry, who are you? And this was apparently the first question in oral exams in Latin in old-time traditional grammar schools. So if you consider a quiz as a test at school, then a quiz that begins with the words quies, who are you? That does kind of make sense.
Yeah.
There are all of these really interesting potential, could be kind of make sensey kind of things around about this word. And, we get other things like quizzical, But yeah, essentially, no one's really too sure. It might come from inquisitive. It might come from that Latin, who are you thing. We also have words like quizby. Now, quizby, Qusby, Etymon line lists as meaning queer or not quite right or bankrupt. And that's slang from 1807. I also wondered, and it turns out just to be a really, really wonderful coincidence, because when I first learned the word quisling, Quisling, I assumed that quisling was in some way etymologically related to the word quiz. And if we consider the word quiz in its first sense to mean something that is odd or unusual or eccentric, then I suppose we could kind of, by a slightly twisty folk etymological type route, we could say, well, quisling, he was not someone who fitted in, he was a traitor, but quisling is in fact, it's a synonym for traitor, but it comes from Vidkun Quisling, who was a Norwegian military officer. So there's absolutely no etymological connection whatsoever. But yeah, an interesting word to consider in the light of those other usages.
Yeah.
So, quiz. Lots of questions, which seems fitting for
does
a
seem
word
fitting.
about eccentricity and possibly answers. And yeah,
I like that.
there we have
That's
quiz.
really interesting. I do enjoy an of unknown origin entry just because of the
Yeah,
I like
sure.
the possibilities. I like the idea. The inquisition, like I can draw such a clear line in my head of how a transition like that would work, where someone's just calling a test, and maybe it's because I'm coming at it from a quiz primarily being a mini test because of the North American context in which I am.
Yeah, sure.
But someone, being like, "Oh, it's time for the Inquisition again," and it's like that becomes shortened in in a school setting, and that just makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
But the quiesce
Whereas
one works
considering
too.
it as
Like,
a piece of entertainment, a competition to show off how much you know, but always for fun in that British sense.
yeah,
Yeah, although inquisitive. I've just had a quick look at it here, which is from the late 14th century, and it comes directly through Old French from late Latin, inquisitivus, which means making inquiry. So yeah, that makes good sense.
yeah,
But yeah,
that's interesting.
it could be, and it could be. Lots of questions, not many answers, but an interesting little wriggle around in the world of quiz.
That's fantastic. Thank you. So my word today is one of those words where it has a variety of completely and utterly common uses now, and it's one of those things where you're like, did those start at the same time, or how did it come to mean all these different things? So the word I have for this time is volume.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, so volume, bigness of a thing, volume, loudness of a sound, volume, a book in a series of books. I was like, what is going on? So
Yeah, sure.
the earliest, and I have to say, I really like the way this kind of went historically. It's nice when the progression of a word, which has nothing to do with me, is just really pleasing to me. It's like, yes,
For
thank
sure.
you for this favor that you have given me, the mists of time.
I think you may have just described why etymology is awesome.
It's true. It's like the universe is just handing you a little candy. So the earliest entry in the OED for volume is, in fact, drumroll please, the book sense. So
Okay.
a collection of written or printed sheets bound together so as to form a book or a tome, which I love the word tome.
I was just going to say I love the word tome so much.
You say the word tome and immediately there's dust around. If it can be candlelit,
Exactly.
it's preferable. Mm-hmm. That book, the book
I
smell.
can smell the word tome.
You can smell the word tome has a smell to it. It's amazing. And a good smell. It's rare that words have good smells immediately associated with them, I find. But yeah, it's good. You can smell the word tome. And then, 1382, a written or printed text. So it started with the book and kind of hung out as just meaning a book for quite some time. So that's in the late 14th century. In 1523, it became a little more specific to, quote, a separately bound portion or division of a work, one of two or more portions into which a work of some size is divided with a view to separate binding, one of a number of books forming a related set or series, and that's from the OED. So
Okay.
that sense of volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, that's from the early 1500s. And then in 1530, it started being used to describe the size, bulk, and dimensions of a book sometimes. And so the book's volume was also how many volumes does it have, but also just the heft of the book itself, the physical object. And then at the end of the 1500s, we get Shakespeare popping up with one of his incredibly frequent entries, his splashy entries into the OED. From Richard II, actually, it's in a figurative use, which is, in the words of the OED, something that is like a book, like basically something that's like a book in some way, especially if it can be studied, quote, after the manner of a book, is the way the OED puts it. So in Richard II,
Interesting.
Richard II's, I didn't write down who was speaking at the time because I'm an excellent scholar. But the line is, Mary, would the word farewell have lengthened hours and added years to his short banishment, he would have had a volume of farewells. But since it would not, he had none of me. Basically, if someone gets banished and the dude talking says, listen, if I could have made him stay away longer by saying goodbye, I would have, but otherwise he gets nothing from me in the way of goodbyes. Which is just a
whole
brilliant,
book of goodbyes.
What a great
Don't let the
knife in
doorknob
back.
hit you on the ass.
Yeah, it's so perfect. I'm not going to say goodbye. I'd only say goodbye if it meant you stay away longer. So that figurative a volume of farewells, an entire, whatever. Skip ahead a couple decades. 1621, it shows up in the OED as a particular bulk, mass, or quantity as an attribute of a thing. And so there's a couple, the entry in 1621 and the entry in 1792 gave me pause. So in this one, it's the example that I found that was best was from 1670, and it said, the Great Hall is beautified with rare pictures in a great volume. So it's describing a mass of things, but it's a standalone in a volume of these things, if that makes sense.
Okay. Lots of things in amongst a bigger number of those things.
Yeah, a bulk, mass, or quantity, probably multitudes of the things, and you're describing how many of them are, like the farewells that is talked about in Richard II. And then in 1792, the end of the 18th century, it becomes the bulk, size, or dimensions of a thing. So a thing's volume rather than a volume of things, if that makes sense.
That's a long time. It's a long time for a word to mean one thing.
Long time. It is a long time.
And then suddenly to mean something else.
Yeah, like it's weird that it took so long in a number of these steps. Like the idea that it was a book, but not one book in a series of books from the end of the 14th to the middle of the 16th century. Like that's weird as well. But anyway, so it took almost 200 years for it to go from a volume of whatever to, the
volume.
The quote is like, he made several violent darts against the volume of the balloon. So the bulk and mass and size of the thing you're attacking or looking at or whatever. Now, along the way, I should say that it acquired its kind of not quite scientific yet meaning or usage. But in 1702, there's a citation that says, it's a quantity or mass, especially a larger one, regarded as matter occupying space.
See,
and so you're getting a more technical... Yeah, go on.
So if you had asked me off the top of your head, where do you think the word volume comes from? I would probably have said, scientists. A bit like the word, I can't remember what word it was that I talked about maybe a couple of months ago. And it came directly from Latin, but had first been used
inertia?
by somebody like Newton. Yes, that's exactly what it was.
With Kepler, yeah.
I would have put volume in a similar category. I would have said that, it would have a very specific scientific meaning, and that it had gone on from there to mean big things or things that could be measured.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
So then in 1786, it then was applied in a musical context. So the quote in the OED is, volume, a word applied to the compass of a voice from grave to acute, also to its tone or power, as when we say such a performer possessed an extensive or rich volume of voice. So it's not
That's
yet...
lovely.
Isn't it lovely? It's not quite yet the loudness of a voice.
Yeah,
but it's
so
the
much
richness
more than that.
and thickness. So
I think that definition speaks to a really beautiful appreciation for and love of vocalists. it's so much more nuanced than it was loud or it was quiet.
Yeah, like this, it's going to sound disparaging, but it's not, because I don't think there's a qualitative thing to this. But I'm trying to think of a good example on the other side of the spectrum. But the best example I can think of for a voice that didn't have volume in this sense would be Billie Holiday, like a very wispy kind of ethereal. You can't listen to Billie Holiday and say there's a voice with richness and thickness. It's not mellifluous. It's, like early mid-period Elvis maybe, where it's just got that honey dripping. Just you need a knife and fork to listen to that voice.
Sure.
That would be volume in that sense in the late 18th century, late 1700s. And then by sort of 1822, we get the entry that talked about the quantity or strength of a sound, which gets much closer, obviously, to the just the noise, the loudness, the level of noise, the thing you can measure as in decibels type of thing as volume. Boy, I almost stepped on a landmine there. Don't call music noise.
You went a little bit Bandalore there.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Just sometimes you just have to say yo-yo. It's okay.
Yeah, just say yo-yo. It's fine.
Just say yo-yo.
I feel like, I don't know, listeners can weigh in whether they want that to be on a mug as well. I'm collecting mug and t-shirt and merch ideas. One of them is probably going to be called "It's Just Feudalism, Stupid." I haven't put the post-it note up yet, but I'm going to.
Just say yo-yo.
Yeah, just say yo-yo. So etymologically, we get this really awesome, I think, progression from books to big things to big noise, and you get all that over several, but basically 500 years getting there. But before that, the reason that it comes, and this is where I thought this was super cool, and this is what made me like, yes, I'm definitely doing this, is that the etymology of it is revealed in the middle of the 17th century. There was a spell where people like Dryden poets like Dryden were big fans of using volume to describe, quoting the OED, a coil, fold, wreath, convolution, especially of a serpent. So the serpent shall swim in silken volume. So that twisting element of like a river or a snake, that kind of...
Dryden, my man.
Right? And the reason that they used that is actually because they were hitting closer to the etymology of this word than anyone else, because the etymology comes from the roll of a parchment, coming from Old French volume, a scroll or book, directly from the Latin volumen, a roll of a manuscript, and literally that which is rolled, from volvere or volvere, depending, which means to turn around or to roll. And the Pi root of this is it's spelled W-E-L, and it means to turn or revolve. And the Pi roots, the cognates here, are interesting to me, because it seems like there's like sort of three branches. So Latin descendants went with a V, Greek went with an H, and Germanic languages went with a W. So with Latin, these are all closer to this because you get the V because volume comes from Latin. So you get convoluted, devolve, evolution, revolution, valve, and vault was interesting, V-A-U-L-T. So either the arched roof of a ceiling, which because it looks like it's been rolled over.
Yeah.
Or to jump. And because if you vault over something, you're making like an arc.
That's gorgeous.
As you jump. The Greek...
I feel it would be amiss of me not to do in this podcast what I do in real life wherever I am. If I ever go into a place that has a vaulted ceiling, then I am compelled to make the joke. I'm pretty sure it's made in a Discworld book, but I always point out to people the beautiful fornication. Just because I can,
because you can.
Latin fornix arch.
And why not? Why not?
Sorry. Please do continue with the V cognates.
So those are basically the V cognates. The Greek cognates, and I like this because this gets me to one of my favorite. It's weird that I don't know if there's a name for this effect where once you learn about something, you see it everywhere, or once you see something for the first time, you notice it everywhere, whereas it was invisible to you before.
That, my dear, is the Baader-Meinhof effect.
There it is. Thank you. And
the reason that I know it is the Baader-Meinhof effect is because I looked it up maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I've looked it up several times before because it happens all the time, and you always forget what it is, and you know it's an almost jarring sensation. Oh, there's that word again. There's that word again. There's that word again.
Yeah.
And since I looked up Baader-Meinhof maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I have been so Baader-Meinhofed by Baader-Meinhof that it hasn't been true. It keeps coming up all over the place, and has just come up again right here.
I keep thinking Dunning-Kruger, which is that thing where stupid people are more confident than smart people.
They think they're clever because they're stupid.
Because they don't know enough to know what they don't know. But Baader-Meinhof, yes. So I don't know if it's that effect coming to life or if this really is a new trend. But since doing this podcast, I can't help but notice that there have been these like weird etymological fads, like these kind of lightning things, where all of a sudden everyone's talking about this etymology. So the newest one is the Triscuits. The cracker,
sure.
I guess I didn't know they were just North American, but these wheat crackers, and there was a post by a guy who writes for one of the late night talk shows. I think he's a writer for the Tonight Show or the Late Show or something, but he looked into the etymology of Triscuits, the Nabisco branded cracker thing, and found out that spoiler alert, but you're late anyway, so here we go. It essentially it's a portmanteau for electricity biscuits, because they were one of the first manufacturing plants to use electricity in the manufacturing process. Somehow, I don't know how they did, but they did, and that was fantastic enough for them to name their biscuit after it.
I feel like they missed an old-timey trick there, because electricity biscuits sound awesome.
I would be more inclined to buy, and I love Triscuits because they're delicious.
Definitely.
But I would definitely.
I don't know what Triscuits taste like, and Triscuit is quite a pleasing word, but
it is.
It's not as good as electricity biscuit.
I would buy the pants off a box of electricity biscuits.
Definitely.
Like that's just And then this is an example. This is a time when we get to talk about one of the previous ones. These examples of like where everyone is suddenly interested in etymology for like 20 minutes on the internet, because the Greek branch of this WEL pi root to turn or revolve went with the H, and so we get the word helix, as in the double helix of DNA, and we get helicopter.
Oh, most favorite.
Right?
Love it.
It's awesome because I feel now it's just kind of silly to talk about because everyone knows this now. But
hipster etymology, trendy. We liked it before it was cool.
But it's so the breakdown that most people would look at and go, it would be, well, heli and copter are the two parts of helicopter, but it's actually helico, which comes from helix, and pter, which is the same root as you get for pterodactyl, P-T-E-R, the wing. So a spiral wing, twisting wing, spinning wing, revolving wing, whatever. But that helico comes from helix, which comes from the turn or revolve, which is the same distant ancestor of volume.
That's amazing.
And in Germanic, it went with a W, so you get words like walk and waltz are the Germanic sort of branches of the family tree that
that's absolutely beautiful
belongs.
Because walking is so much more spinny than people assume.
Yeah. Like if you're lost in the woods, you will go in circles. And as you're waltzing, people are spinning around as they're waltzing and turning and twisting and revolving and everything else. And so,
this is so great.
And the best, and of course, the best part of this is that this fantastic journey of volume for the past, coming up on 7 centuries, it all comes back to books, as they always do. And so, the second best part is that Smith talks about volume.
Oh, hooray! I've missed Smith. Where has he been? Has he been in quarantine?
He's been in quarantine. I haven't been able to get within 6 feet of him, but we've decided he's part of the family now, so here we go. So for anyone who's not sure what the hell we're on about, there's a reference book that I thoroughly adore, having discovered it in the earlier days of this podcast, called Synonyms Discriminated by a priest, actually, a clergyman by the name of Smith, Charles Smith, which makes him very hard to look up because here's a book by John Doe. Go and find more information about him as a person. But his book is essentially it's not quite an etymological dictionary. It's not quite a regular dictionary. His basic task was to look at words that, at least in his time, were often identified as synonyms, and he's sort of parsing why they're not quite synonyms or how they're different. And so that's why the synonyms discriminated thing. So it's interesting not because he's a particular authority, because neither are we, but because he's just really good at writing stuff down. And it's interesting to see what people considered synonyms at the time and what could distinguish them and how that worked. And it's just fun to read.
Ryan, just say yo-yo.
Just say yo-yo. So Smith, it's a good book. Get it and read it.
Sorry, I'm way more amused at my own joke than I should be. I'm mainly laughing because I feel like I'm going to tell my husband about this, and he's going to start saying "just say yo-yo" to me about 700 or 800 times a day.
Yeah.
Like any time that I get a little bit too wordy, you can imagine that is a fairly frequent occurrence.
It's going to be a thing.
Just say yo-yo.
So, oh man. So you're not allowed to just say Yo-Yo Smith because he's a dear friend. But I understand completely.
Yeah, I mean, just saying yo-yo is the absolute antithesis of the absolute beauty and whimsical delight of Smith.
Yes, and also this podcast.
Yeah, indeed.
We have built a whole show about saying too much about words. So volume shows up in two different entries in Smith. One for the word, the chief entry is tome. And so the way he distinguishes tome from volume is by saying, quote, "One volume may contain many tomes, or one tome may contain many volumes. The tome is distinguished by the division of the work, the volume by the arrangements of the binder." Now, I don't know what that means, but I like what it sounded like. Because it sounds like that seems like, to me, Smith is kind of going, I know these are different, and maybe if I just say enough words, people will believe me.
I think what I take from that, what I'm thinking about is a publication like the Encyclopedia Britannica. Yeah? Did you have a relative who had Encyclopedia Britannica volumes?
Yeah, we had a set when I was growing up.
Fancy.
Yeah.
We did not, and I was always so jealous of people who did. Anyway, the Encyclopedia Britannica was split up into volumes because obviously they were big books, and if you were to put them all into one book, it would be gigantic. So you would get the alphabetical divisions. So it would go from, desperately trying to think of an example and can't think. It would go from aardvark to all or something like that.
Yeah.
So that then would be a division of volume. Volume 1 goes from aardvark to all. And then volume 2 goes from barbecue to, whatever.
Yeah.
So by Smith's reckoning, the volume would be the physical book, aardvark to all.
Yeah.
But within the book itself, there would be the divisions, the entry for such and such, or the chapter on whatever.
Right.
And it seems that Smith is saying that that's the tome.
Yeah, okay.
So there might be a tome within a volume, and there could also be volumes within a tome.
But
so
you
if
could
there
say
were
the
several
Encyclopedia
volumes
Britannica
on,
as a whole is a tome.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That makes more sense. The other place that Smith...
But yeah, it does sound a bit like they're just different, okay?
Yeah, just trust me. The other place that volume shows up is that sort of scientific measurement sense. So it shows up under the entry for mass. And because I like it, I'm going to read the whole entry for mass. It's not very long, don't worry. So he says, and this will give you an idea of what it's like to read Smith, because he goes to an entry and then he will just basically run down the different things that he thinks are generally perceived as synonyms and then describes them. So under mass, he says, the mass is the quantity of matter belonging to a body. The volume is its extent in length, width, and depth. One judges of the mass of a body by its weight, the weight of all bodies being proportionate to the quantity of matter which they contain. Dimension is measured in a single line as length, breadth, height, thickness, circumference, When the aggregate of these is expressed by the plural dimensions, it is equivalent to extent or size. Quantity is the abstract quality of amount, the being so much and neither more nor less. It is that attribute of a thing which makes it capable of measurement.
Do not just say yo-yo.
No.
That's absolutely gorgeous, isn't it?
I just wanted to get to his description of the word quantity there. The abstract quality of amount, the being so much and neither more nor less. It's like, oh man, yeah. I love Smith so much.
I love Smith so much.
But yeah, so that's there's the journey of volume from scroll, wound up things, to book, to big books, to big things, to big voices, to loud noises, and eventually to Anchorman.
Doesn't everything eventually get to Anchorman?
Life is one long journey from books to Anchorman.
I'll take that.
If you take no other lessons from this show ever, let it be that one.
If we teach you nothing else, let us at least.
Yeah. And before we actually... Yeah, so I thought that was kind of cool. Before we wrap, I wanted just to mention real quick, we gave a shout out to Loretta for her awesome praising of Amy. We have got a few other emails. They were long and more in depth. And so, to be honest, I just haven't had the brain power recently. I've opened them up and been like, no, I can't give this its due right now. But just because I haven't responded yet, do not take that to mean I haven't read them. And certainly nobody should think, oh, well, they only pick the ones or whatever. They don't really read them. It's amazing to get emails. So if you have any comments or questions
absolutely.
Or whatever else, then please absolutely email. If you don't follow us on Twitter, there's a bit of an exchange.
Why not?
I don't know why.
You follow us on
If you're not an etymology Twitter, that's a thing, by the way. And it's a thing that you should be a part of because it's awesome. But there was... So the sort of vaguely Dan Brown-esque conspiratorial pie analysis by letter and sound book that you were talking about last week.
Yeah.
It was a bit of a discussion about that and a related book where we heard from a quote capital A academic linguist who was like, yeah, it's not really worth much in the way of actual learning. It's interesting as an artifact, but it's not a reputable analysis. And then someone else fired back and said, well, actually, here's this other guy who says that it's really good. And he's a professor over here. And so I was like, okay, this seems like there's a couple of different things here. I'm going to bring in the big guns and tag the Endless Knots Mark Sundaram to be like, Mark, help, I need a grown-up. I need an adult here because I don't know what I'm doing.
We both pointed out that, like, as soon as we were aware of this book, our first thought was, I wonder what Mark thinks about this.
Yeah, he thinks it's insane. And so that was good to see. So I was just like, oh, apparently the guy who wrote, I can't remember if it's the guy who wrote the book that you referenced or the guy who wrote the book that was referenced by the defender of the book you referenced.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
But he was talking about one of them, and he said that the guy also believes that Proto-Indo-European as a concept... I'm rushing really quickly to Twitter to see if I can actually quote Mark on this because it's just so worth it because he says, okay.
I should also point out, in the interest of full disclosure, that having just said, why aren't you following us on Twitter? I'm not really a Twitter person. So, I mean, I follow us on Twitter, but I don't really engage very much with Twitter because it frightens my brain a bit. But yeah, it's super duper cool to be able to go, I wonder what this academic thinks about this thing. And to just be able to reach out and go, hey, academic guy, what do you think about this thing?
Yeah. So he says, he's talking about Rendick, the guy that wrote the book that was being used to defend the book you were talking about. He says, I gather that he also theorizes that Proto-Indo-European was a made-up language created from scratch by astronomer priests in the Arctic Circle. So, yeah.
Ooh.
So, an interesting dude to read or possibly to talk
this
to.
This sounds
over beers,
like a veritable quiz.
A veritable quiz, yeah. And so, yeah. So anyway, all that is to say, these are the kind of things that I find interesting, and etymology Twitter provides me, and you're listening to me right now, and so it probably would interest you as well. And so
Etymology Twitter provides.
Check us out on Twitter and check out all of our friends on Twitter as well, because they're all nerdy like us, only smarter, which is helpful. So
Yeah.
it's good times. Anyway.
I do love nerdy people who are smarter than me.
Yeah.
And there are so many of them out there.
It's the best.
And that's it for another episode of Lexitecture. To get in touch with us about something you heard in this episode, you can email us at words@lexitecture.com. You can also follow along and talk to us at Lexitecture on Facebook and Twitter, and at Lexitecture Podcast on Instagram. For back episodes and the occasional blog post, visit us at Lexitecture.com. Thanks very much, and we'll talk to you again soon.